In May 2023, 17-year-old Jamie Nguyen and her best friend, 18-year-old Zack Coleman, set out on what was supposed to be a 3-day hiking trip in California's Redwood National Park. When they didn't return, a massive search operation began. Their tent was found intact. A single hiking boot belonging to Jamie was discovered 400 yards away. Then, nothing. The search was called off after 2 weeks. Exactly 1 year later, in May 2024, two backpackers found Zack Coleman sitting on a fallen redwood log 11 miles from the original campsite. He was alive but profoundly changed, eyes open, unresponsive, severely malnourished, with marks on his wrists and ankles. His first words, spoken at the hospital: "The trees know where she is." Jamie Nguyen has never been found. But what happened in those woods, and who was responsible for the physical and psychological devastation inflicted on these teenagers, you will find out in this video. On May 17, 2023, Jamie Nguyen and Zack Coleman parked their 2012 Honda Civic at the Tall Trees Trailhead parking lot. Surveillance footage shows them arriving at 9:36 a.m. Jamie was a high school junior with plans to study environmental science. Zack had just graduated and worked part-time at an outdoor equipment store. They had obtained the required backcountry permit for 3 nights. The permit indicated they planned to camp along the Redwood Creek Trail and return on May 20th. At 9:42 a.m., they were captured on the trailhead camera starting their hike. Jamie wore black hiking pants, a red fleece jacket, and new Merrell hiking boots. Zack had on khaki cargo pants, a blue waterproof shell, and worn Salomon trail runners. They each carried backpacks. Jamie's was dark green, Zack's bright orange. The weather that morning was foggy with light rain, typical for the region in spring. At 10:17 a.m., Jamie posted a photo on Instagram showing massive redwoods with the caption, "Giants watching over us." At 12:43 p.m., Zack texted his mother, "Made it to first camp, all good, reception spotty." Cell tower data confirmed this message came from within the park boundaries. At 2:36 p.m., Jamie called her sister. The call lasted only 47 seconds. According to her sister, Jamie mentioned hearing weird noises, but laughed it off as probably just elk or something. That was the last confirmed communication from either teenager. On May 20th, when neither Jamie nor Zack had returned or made contact, Jamie's parents called the park rangers. Zack's mother separately contacted park authorities at 7:42 p.m. after receiving no response to multiple texts. Rangers located their Honda in the parking lot, still containing a cooler with perishable food items for their return journey. A preliminary search of the immediate area revealed nothing unusual. On the morning of May 21st, a formal search operation began. Park rangers, local search and rescue teams, and volunteers combed the area around the Tall Trees Trail. Tracking dogs were brought in by afternoon at 4:27 p.m. Searchers found Jamie and Zack's tent at their permitted campsite along Redwood Creek. The tent was properly set up with sleeping bags inside. Their backpacks were there with food, water filters, maps, and other gear. Nothing appeared disturbed or stolen. The only unusual finding was a small notebook belonging to Jamie, with the final entry from May 18th that read, "Day 2. Zack thinks someone is following us. Probably just paranoid. Going to explore upstream tomorrow." On May 22nd, the search expanded. At 11:13 a.m., a search dog alerted to Jamie's scent about 400 yards north of the campsite, leading to the discovery of her left hiking boot, partially buried in mud near the creek. The search team noted the ground showed signs of disturbance, possibly indicating a struggle, though heavy rain in the preceding days had obscured most potential evidence. The dogs lost the scent at the creek's edge. Helicopter teams with thermal imaging joined the effort, but dense tree cover limited their effectiveness. Ground teams expanded their search radius to 5 miles from the campsite. On May 25th, they found a water bottle with Zack's name written on it approximately 2 miles upstream from the campsite. No fingerprints could be recovered due to exposure to the elements. After 2 weeks of intensive searching covering over 50 square miles, With no further evidence discovered, the full-scale search operation was officially suspended on June 3, 2023. Jamie's parents hired private search teams that continued intermittent efforts throughout the summer. By fall, the case had gone cold. The official report listed both teenagers as missing persons, with possible wilderness accident as the presumed cause. Then on May 17, 2024, exactly 1 year after Jamie and Zack had set out on their hike, hikers Michael Barnes and Kate Wright were on a multi-day trek in a remote section of the park, approximately 11 miles northwest of the original campsite. As they navigated around a massive fallen redwood, they spotted what they initially thought was a mannequin or scarecrow propped against the trunk. He was sitting perfectly still, Barnes later told investigators, just staring straight ahead. I called out, but he didn't move. When we got closer, we realized it was a person. He was breathing, but didn't acknowledge us at all. The figure was Zack Coleman. He weighed 97 pounds, down from his previous 165. His clothes were not hiking gear, but a plain gray t-shirt and drawstring pants. His hair had been cut very short, almost shaved. Most disturbing were the marks on his wrists and ankles, circular scarring consistent with long-term restraint. He was severely malnourished, dehydrated, and had numerous infected wounds on his back and legs. Barnes and Wright used their emergency satellite device to call for help. Park rangers and medical personnel arrived via helicopter at 3:47 p.m. and evacuated Zack to Redwood Memorial Hospital in Fortuna. Throughout the rescue, Zack remained unresponsive, eyes open but seemingly unaware of his surroundings. The only physical reaction came when one of the medics tried to put a blanket over him. He violently pushed it away and began trembling. At the hospital, doctors noted Zack was suffering from severe malnutrition, vitamin D deficiency, and multiple infections. His body showed signs of prolonged captivity, pressure sores on his hips and shoulders, muscle atrophy, and the restraint marks on his wrists and ankles. His feet were unusually clean and soft for someone supposedly surviving in the wilderness for a year. Blood work revealed traces of various sedatives in his system. For the first 48 hours, Zack did not speak or respond to questions. He accepted water and liquid nutrition, but showed no recognition of his parents when they arrived. On the third day, while a nurse was checking his vitals, he suddenly spoke his first words. "The trees know where she is." When asked about Jamie, he became agitated, repeating only, "Don't ask about her. Don't ask about her." As Zack's physical condition stabilized, his psychological state remained deeply concerning. He would stare at walls for hours, occasionally muttering phrases about the collector and root system. He refused to sleep in darkness, becoming severely distressed if the lights were turned off. Most notably, he insisted that windows be covered at all times and became hysterical when he could see trees from his hospital room. On May 23rd, 1 week after his discovery, Zack began responding to simple questions from Dr. Elena Mercer, a psychiatrist specializing in trauma. His initial account was fragmented but presented a coherent narrative. He claimed that he and Jamie had been separated during a sudden rainstorm that caused a flash flood along the creek. He said he had been swept downstream, suffered a head injury, and spent the year in a confused state, surviving by finding abandoned cabins and foraging. "I tried to find her," he told Dr. Mercer. "I looked everywhere, but I got lost. The trees all look the same. I think Jamie made it back. I think she's okay. Did she make it back?" Detective Marcus Ortiz of the Humboldt County Sheriff's Department was assigned as lead investigator. With 17 years of experience in missing persons and wilderness cases, Ortiz immediately noted inconsistencies in Zack's account. The medical evidence directly contradicted a wilderness survival scenario. His vitamin D deficiency indicated minimal sun exposure. His feet were soft and uncalloused, not what would be expected after a year of walking in the forest. The restraint marks told a different story entirely. When someone comes back without the person they disappeared with, Detective Ortiz noted in his case file, we have to consider them both a victim and a potential suspect until proven otherwise. The investigation proceeded along two parallel tracks, determining what happened to Jamie Nguyen and understanding what had happened to Zack during his year of absence. Forensic analysis of Zack's clothing revealed significant data. The gray shirt and pants he was wearing when found were made of standard cotton polyester blend, but contained traces of a specific industrial-grade disinfectant used primarily in medical and research facilities. Fibers embedded in the healed wounds on his back matched a particular type of synthetic carpet, manufactured exclusively for commercial installations. On May 27th, lab results from hair samples taken from Zack provided crucial information. Isotope analysis can reveal changes in diet and environment by examining hair growth, which records these changes chronologically. Zack's hair showed he had been kept in the same location for most of the year, on a remarkably consistent diet high in processed carbohydrates and low in protein. There were trace amounts of sedatives present throughout the growth period, suggesting regular administration. He wasn't wandering the woods, the forensic report concluded. Subject was kept in a controlled environment with regulated food intake and chemical sedation for approximately 10-11 months. When confronted with these inconsistencies, Zack became highly agitated. "I told you what happened," he repeated, rocking back and forth. "I got lost. That's what happened. I got lost." Further examination of his injuries provided more information. The restraint marks showed evidence of long-term binding with occasional position changes. The pattern of pressure sores indicated he had been kept seated or lying down for extended periods. Most significantly, the infected wounds on his back formed a distinct pattern, not random injuries from wilderness survival, but deliberate, methodical cuts that forensic pathologists identified as a crude map of what appeared to be river systems or tree roots. On June 2nd, 2 weeks after Zack's discovery, Detective Ortiz received permission to place a hidden camera in Zack's hospital room. The footage revealed that when alone, Zack's behavior changed dramatically. He would methodically inspect the room's corners, check the window coverings repeatedly, and press his ear to the wall as if listening for something. Most notably, at night, when he thought no one was watching, he would take the paper cup from his water pitcher and tap it against the wall in a specific pattern. When the pattern was analyzed by the forensic audio team, they identified it as a simple binary code, essentially Morse code with two distinct sounds instead of dots and dashes. Translated, the message repeated the same phrase, "All clear, no sight." Detective Ortiz began to suspect that Zack's fear was not generalized trauma, but specific terror of someone or something he believed was still watching him. The breakthrough came when a nurse reported finding a small object clutched in Zack's hand after he fell asleep. It was a folded paper with microscopic writing that read, "If you tell them about me, I will take your parents too. The trees are my eyes." This discovery shifted the investigation. Zack wasn't a suspect. He was a victim still under the psychological control of his captor. Based on this understanding, Detective Ortiz arranged for Zack to be moved to a secure facility with no windows and no plants or trees visible. In this environment, with assurances of complete safety, Zack began to speak more freely. His true account emerged in fragments over several days. He and Jamie had been at their campsite when they were approached by a man who identified himself as a park biologist studying redwood root systems. He was articulate, knowledgeable, and carried official-looking documentation. He invited them to see a remarkable natural phenomenon just upstream, a redwood that had grown in a perfect spiral pattern due to unusual underground water flow. He seemed normal, Zack told investigators. Professional, like he belonged there. He knew so much about the trees. Jamie was interested because of her environmental science plans. We followed him maybe half a mile upstream. Then everything went black. Zack recalled waking in a windowless room with artificial lighting. Jamie was there too, both of them restrained to chairs. Their captor explained that they were participating in an important study on cognitive development and isolation. Over the next few weeks, both teenagers were subjected to a regimen of psychological conditioning. They were shown images of trees while receiving mild electric shocks, creating an association between forests and pain. They were given food only after repeating specific phrases about the root system and the collector. He called himself the curator, Zack explained. He said he was collecting data for the trees, that they were sentient but operated on a different time scale than humans. He said they'd been watching us for centuries, gathering information. The curator kept detailed records of their reactions, taking notes during sessions where he would explain his theories about redwood consciousness and collective plant intelligence. He forced them to memorize passages from botanical texts interspersed with his own writings. When they made mistakes, punishment followed: food withdrawal, isolation, or physical abuse. According to Zack, after approximately 2 months, the curator began taking Jamie away for special sessions. She would return subdued, often unable to speak for hours. After one such session in late August, she didn't return at all. The curator told Zack that she had been accepted by the root system and was providing nutrients for the greater consciousness. "I think he killed her," Zack said, his voice barely audible. "But sometimes he would say she was still alive, just underground now. He would say I could join her if I proved myself worthy." For the remaining months, Zack was subjected to increasingly bizarre conditioning. The curator would take him blindfolded into the forest at night, leave him tied to trees for hours, and force him to recite the tree commandments, rules and concepts about plant superiority and human subservience. Throughout this period, Zack was regularly sedated, his food and water laced with various drugs that kept him compliant and confused. In April 2024, the curator began what he called the final preparation. Zack was told he would be released back into the world as a messenger of the trees. He was trained to respond to certain visual and auditory cues. Specifically, the sight of redwoods would trigger intense fear and obedience. He was given explicit instructions about what to say if found, and threatened with the murder of his parents if he revealed the truth. "He showed me pictures of my parents' house," Zack explained. "Recent pictures. He knew where they lived, their routines. He said the trees were watching them, and if I told anyone about him, they would be absorbed into the root system like Jamie." On May 16, 2024, the curator took Zack deep into the forest, positioned him on the fallen log, and told him to remain there until the messengers found him. He administered a final dose of sedatives and left. Based on Zack's description and partial memories of his captivity, investigators began searching for facilities near Redwood National Park that could have served as a holding location. They focused on properties with underground or windowless rooms, particularly those owned by individuals with backgrounds in botany, biology, or environmental science. On June 15, 2024, this approach yielded a potential location. A former research station owned by Pacific Northwest Botanical Studies, located 3.7 miles from where Zack was found, had been officially closed since 2020, but showed evidence of recent power usage according to utility records. The facility, originally built to study redwood genetics, included underground growth chambers for seedling research. When investigators obtained a search warrant and entered the facility on June 17th, they found it apparently abandoned, but with clear signs of recent occupation. The underground level contained 2 small rooms that matched Zack's description of his captivity. One room had restraint chairs bolted to the floor. The walls were covered with handwritten notes about arboreal consciousness and mycorrhizal communication networks. Most disturbingly, they discovered a room containing sophisticated recording equipment and hundreds of labeled audio cassettes documenting subject responses to stimulus. Forensic teams found hair, blood, and tissue samples that matched both Zack and Jamie. Partial fingerprints recovered from equipment were run through law enforcement databases. On June 24th, they identified a match: Dr. Philip Hargrove, 57, former research director at Pacific Northwest Botanical Studies, until the program's funding was cut in 2019. His employment had been terminated after colleagues reported increasingly erratic behavior and unorthodox research proposals involving plant-human communication. Records indicated Hargrove had published legitimate research on mycorrhizal networks, the underground fungal connections between trees often called the Wood Wide Web, until 2017. After that, his work became increasingly fringe, with rejected papers proposing that redwoods possessed a form of consciousness and could communicate with properly conditioned human subjects. His academic career ended after a university ethics committee rejected his proposal to use isolation and controlled stress to enhance human receptivity to arboreal signals. A search of Hargrove's apartment in Eureka revealed it had been hastily abandoned. His computer contained detailed files on Jamie and Zack, including social media monitoring that predated their disappearance, suggesting he had specifically targeted them. Most concerning were similar files on 6 other young people who had visited Redwood National Park in recent years. 2 of these individuals were already in the missing persons database. The investigation expanded to include these other potential victims. On July 8th, using cadaver dogs and ground-penetrating radar, search teams located human remains in the forest floor approximately 200 yards from the research facility. The remains were later identified through dental records as Jamie Nguyen. Forensic analysis indicated she had died in September 2023, approximately 4 months after her disappearance. Evidence suggested she had been buried in a shallow grave with various plant specimens placed around her body in a ritualistic pattern. As the investigation continued, law enforcement in 3 states joined the search for Philip Hargrove. Trail cameras and witness reports indicated he was moving north, likely toward the Canadian border. On July 27, 2024, a Forest Service employee in Olympic National Park in Washington state reported encountering a man matching Hargrove's description. When park rangers and FBI agents responded to the location, they found an improvised campsite with botanical research equipment and journals containing entries about preparing new subjects for arboreal communion. On August 3rd, authorities tracked Hargrove to a remote cabin near the Canadian border. When officers approached, he barricaded himself inside. After a 4-hour standoff, Hargrove emerged holding what appeared to be an explosive device. He was shot by FBI snipers and pronounced dead at the scene. The device was later determined to be non-functional, constructed from botanical research equipment and road flares. A search of the cabin revealed the full extent of Hargrove's delusions. Journals dating back to 2016 documented his communication with the redwood forests and his belief that the trees had chosen him as their intermediary. He described hearing the voice of the root system while conducting research in underground growth chambers, where he had spent extended periods in isolation. The journals indicated that after losing his academic position, he became convinced that the trees wanted him to prepare young minds to receive their messages. The most disturbing discovery was a detailed plan to abduct more young people from national parks across the Pacific Northwest. Maps marked with collection points and schedules coordinated with peak tourist seasons suggested Hargrove intended his operation to continue indefinitely. A manifesto titled The Arboreal Awakening outlined his vision for creating a network of tree communicators who would spread his message about redwood consciousness. As the investigation concluded, attention turned to the other potential victims identified in Hargrove's files. On September 12, 2024, using information from his journals, search teams located the remains of another victim, 19-year-old Eliza Contreras, who had disappeared from Prairie Creek Redwood State Park in 2021. Evidence suggested Hargrove had refined his methods over time, with earlier victims subjected to less sophisticated conditioning than Zack and Jamie. For Zack Coleman, recovery has been challenging. Physical healing progressed steadily, but the psychological damage proved more persistent. He remained at a specialized trauma treatment facility for 6 months, where doctors worked to undo the conditioning Hargrove had instilled. The association between trees and fear proved particularly difficult to break. Even photographs of forests would trigger panic attacks and dissociative episodes. Dr. Mercer's notes from November 2024 indicate patient continues to exhibit extreme dendrophobia, fear of trees. When shown images of redwoods, he experiences tachycardia, hyperventilation, and in some cases fugue states, where he recites phrases about the root system and the collector's commandments. This conditioned response is proving resistant to standard exposure therapy techniques. By January 2025, Zack had progressed enough to move home with his parents, though under continued psychiatric care. His family relocated from California to Arizona, choosing a desert landscape specifically to avoid triggering environments. He began taking online courses, slowly rebuilding some semblance of normal life, though he remained unable to go outside on his own. According to his most recent psychological assessment in April 2025, subject continues to experience severe PTSD symptoms, particularly hypervigilance and intrusive thoughts related to his captor. He reports persistent belief that he is being observed when in proximity to plants or trees. When asked about future plans, subject expresses desire to live in urban environments with minimal vegetation. Sleep disturbances persist, with frequent nightmares about being absorbed into the ground. The FBI closed the active investigation after confirming Hargrove had acted alone. His academic colleagues expressed shock, describing him as intensely focused, but showing no obvious signs of violent potential. Review of university records revealed concerns had been raised about his mental health as early as 2016, but no formal action was taken beyond the termination of his research program. Jamie Nguyen's parents established a scholarship in her name for students pursuing environmental science, with a focus on ethical research practices. They also advocated for increased security measures in national parks, including more frequent ranger patrols and improved emergency communication systems. For the families of the other victims, the resolution brought answers but little comfort. The parents of Eliza Contreras told reporters, "Knowing what happened doesn't make it easier. It just changes the nature of the nightmare." The case prompted a review of security protocols in research facilities near national parks and wilderness areas. It also led to increased scrutiny of terminated research projects with human subjects components. The FBI established a task force specifically focused on potential predators using wilderness areas as hunting grounds, acknowledging that the isolation of such environments creates particular vulnerabilities. In his final interview with Detective Ortiz before the case was closed, Zack Coleman was asked if there was anything else he wanted to say about his experience. After a long silence, he replied, "Sometimes I still hear him at night." He said the trees would always be watching me. "I know it's not real. I know the trees aren't conscious. But I can't look at them without hearing his voice. I can't sleep without checking that the windows are covered. The rational part of me knows he's gone, but some part of me will always be in that underground room, listening to him explain how the roots are going to absorb me." The medical file notes that Zack is expected to require ongoing psychological support for the foreseeable future. His psychiatrist's final assessment reads, "While physical captivity has ended, the mental imprisonment continues. The patient's conditioned responses and traumatic associations may never fully resolve. Recovery in these cases is measured not by elimination of symptoms, but by the development of management strategies and the reclamation of functional independence. The subject has begun this process, but faces a lifetime of navigating the psychological aftermath of systematic trauma." The case of Jamie Nguyen and Zack Coleman stands as one of the most disturbing examples of predatory behavior in national park history. It reveals how wilderness areas, valued for their isolation and natural beauty, can be weaponized by those with malicious intent. The investigation ultimately uncovered not a mysterious disappearance, but a calculated abduction by a disturbed individual who exploited the vulnerability of young people in remote settings. For visitors to national parks, the case serves as a sobering reminder of basic safety precautions. Stay on marked trails, inform others of exact hiking plans, carry emergency communication devices, and be wary of strangers even in seemingly official capacities. For law enforcement, it highlights the challenges of investigating crimes in wilderness areas, where evidence rapidly deteriorates and search areas can be vast and inaccessible. And for Zack Coleman, now 19 years old, it represents a defining trauma, one that transformed a simple hiking trip into a year-long nightmare and left him forever changed, permanently afraid of the forests he once loved to explore. When asked if he would ever return to California, he replied simply, "I can't go where the trees are tall. I'll always feel him watching." The cassette tapes recovered from Hargrove's facility remain in FBI evidence storage. They contain hundreds of hours of sessions with his victims, documenting in clinical detail the methodical breaking and reshaping of young minds. The transcripts are sealed by court order, deemed too disturbing for public release. The final entry in the official case file notes that Zack Coleman still wakes screaming in the night, his hands moving in patterns that spell out messages to the trees that he believes are always listening, always watching, their roots reaching for him through the earth below.